Hi guys, in this video I want to talk a little bit about how to win at the advanced level of play and some of the differences between the advanced level versus the intermediate level. Just to make a couple of things clear, first of all I'm not going to just repeat all the stuff that I said in the intermediate level video and rehash it. There's a lot of stuff in there that still applies, just sort of more so. As I was saying in that video, that as you get more advanced, you do more of this, you do less of that. So that all still applies, and I'd say it probably would be worthwhile going back just to have another look at that video. But I'm not going to just repeat the same things over again. I'd rather cover some new ground. So I'm going to basically be talking about some of the differences between the intermediate and advanced play, and just things that I didn't really mention so much in the intermediate level video. So new stuff rather than just a repeat. The second thing I really wanted to make clear was when I'm talking about advanced level play, I'm talking about more or less around my level, okay? Which sounds a little bit big-headed, okay, you know, advanced level play, whatever. But I'm talking around about the level at which I play and at which I can appreciate and understand the sport from what I've seen. So I'm talking around about that level of, say, maybe 800, 700, 800 in the world upwards. Now I'm not saying that I'm 700 or 800 in the world, but I'm competitive with some of those guys, I've played against them, and I can appreciate what's going on. It would be a little bit hard for me to say, okay, this is what's going on in the top 100 in the world, because all I can do in that respect is kind of do the same thing that you guys do, which is look at the videos. And occasionally I get to play someone like William Hensel or Simon Gerrard, who's been up there, and I get a little taste of it. But their level to my level it's a lot different, and it's very, very hard for me to be able to say this is what's going on at that level, because I'm not pushing them, I'm not making them work really, really hard. So it would be a bit ridiculous to me to be claiming that I'm really talking about elite level play here. So yeah, 700 to 800 in the world downwards, I think is not you know too ambitious to be saying it's roughly what's going on around that level and lower. My own rankings, I think I was best at 900, and I've beaten a couple of guys who are higher, so I don't think it's too much of a stretch. So just that's where we're getting to, and if you can get to that level, I think it's a pretty good start anyway, so it's not a bad level to be at some of the play. So there we go. Okay. In the previous two videos of beginning and intermediate level play, I had a couple of little catchphrases just to kind of sum things up. Not really any different in the advanced level play. I've still got a little catchphrase that you can sort of keep in mind. And I guess the thing that kind of sums up advanced level play at this level is make it happen. And what I mean by that is we're no longer passively hoping that the opponent will make mistakes or putting the ball there waiting for the opponent to make a mistake, because that at this level isn't going to cut it. Okay? At the level that I'm playing at, putting the ball back safely and defensively. And by defensively I don't mean backspin or even the defensive style. I mean putting it back without taking any attempt to vary spin, do something positive with the ball. Just passively putting the ball back with virtually no risk taking, no attempt to do something with the ball, just popping it back. That level of play isn't going to work at this level. Okay? I honestly can't say I know anybody at this level who plays that kind of style of just putting the ball back and not really doing anything with it. Okay? And just to be clear, I'm not talking about a long pick blocker standing there and letting the opponent hit and then putting the ball back with his pips. Okay? That's not what I necessarily call passive play, because at this level the guys who do that, they still do vary the ball, vary the spin, roll. They don't just stand there and just pop everything back doing nothing. Okay? It's the doing nothing part that I'm trying to kind of emphasise, is that you can't let things happen. Okay? You've got to take initiative now. You've got to make it happen. Okay? And that's part of this aggressive attitude that we're getting into. And by aggressive, what I'm talking about is not necessarily top spinning and attacking in the traditional sense of being the person playing attacks. What I'm talking about is taking your style, the way you play, and taking more calculated risks with your style, pushing the envelope a little bit more, and in order to force mistakes from our opponent rather than hoping that mistakes will just come. Because at this level, you're not going to get enough mistakes from your opponent just because of, say, poor technique. I mean, basically what I'm trying to say is your opponent's not going to make enough easy errors for you to beat him. Okay? Won't work. Not at the advanced level of play. So instead we have to force some mistakes from him. And you'll still make maybe one or two a game. You still get a couple of freebies, but you're not going to get enough to beat him playing a passive, safe game. So you've got to step things up a little bit and you've got to get more aggressive. And that means that if you're going to be a close to the table blocker who stands there on the backhand and just blocks, moves the ball around, you're going to have to get a little bit sharper with your pace and your changes of pace. You're going to have to get a little bit better with your placement. You're going to have to get the ball a little bit shorter when you go short, deeper when you go deep, wider when you go wide, more pace on it, occasional twiddles, good rolls. And what you're doing is, instead of playing that 100% don't make a mistake game, which will get you up to that mid-intermediate level, now we're starting to look at playing that, anywhere 70 to 90% game, where you're going to make some mistakes, because you're pushing the envelope of what you can do a little bit more. And so maybe you'll only get the ball on 80% of the time. But of those 80%, you're hoping to force errors from your opponent. So of those 80% that you get, you're winning the point 70-80% of the time. Okay? That will give you roughly 50% of the points just from that. And you're then trying on your opponents, when he's serving, when he's making the play, you're also trying to do the same thing, so that although you're missing some, the points that you succeed on, you're winning a higher percentage of points. And it's that attitude that we're talking about in terms of getting more aggressive. Okay? So as a defender, when I was defending, rather than just putting the ball back safely, I was varying spin. Heavy pips, floating, chopping, coming in, picking off balls, rather than just safely put the ball back, same spin, put the ball back, same spin. So it's no longer enough to get the ball on the table. We have to try and do something with it, do something positive with it to increase our chances. And live with the fact that by doing some more positive things, we're going to make the odd mistake, because we're trying to do some things that are a little bit more difficult. But hopefully, because we're going to get more success and we're going to get more errors from our opponent, we're going to set up our points better, hopefully we should be winning a higher percentage of those points. So it kind of keeps us ahead of the game. So that's what I'm talking about in aggressive play. Also remember, I talked a little bit about at the intermediate level, just a rule of 3. Getting 3 attacks on when you're attacking, getting 3 blocks on when you're defending. That still applies to an extent, but it does change a little bit. And what I mean by that is, at this level, everybody's got a fairly decent weapon. You should have a decent attack. You may not have lots of attacks, but whatever attack you do have, you should be able to perform it quite well at the advanced level. And what that means, the flow on from that is that basically if you are attacking and you make 3 good attacks at this level, it's actually very, very difficult for your opponent to block the ball 3 times, because the attacks are getting much, much stronger than the block is getting. Okay? When you think about blocks, an intermediate blocker to block the ball, the technique is very simple. Put the bat there, put the bat there, put the bat there. So to go to an advanced level blocking, the technique hasn't really changed very much. Your reflexes aren't going to really get a lot faster. You may read the ball a little bit better. So, but to go from an intermediate attacker who's swinging to an advanced level attacker, the technique starts to, the difference between an intermediate attack to an advanced attack is much bigger than an intermediate block to an advanced block, in essence. So what happens is it basically means that as an attacker, if you make 3 good attacks at this level, yeah, you're generally going to win the point. As a blocker, when you're on the defence, it's actually quite difficult to make 3 good blocks, simply because it's so tough against the extra power and speed in the advanced level attacks. So the rule of 3 that I'm talking about changes a little bit here. And what that means is that usually on attack, yep, go for your 3 attacks, you're looking for that consistency and power. On the defence though, it's not always enough to just put the ball back 3 times. We now have to focus on, if we're blocking with the inverted, we've got to get either a little bit more pace with the block, not a lot, just a bit more pace. We've got to get our placement better. So we've got to take a couple more chances on that block, because if we just put the ball back 3 times with the inverted, chances are our opponent's going to put that away and then we'll lose the point. When we're blocking with the pip side, so blocking here, blocking with the pip, that's a little bit different, because the increased spin and pace from your opponent will come onto your pips, and it may be a little bit harder to keep very short, but you should get a little bit more effect from the spin increase. You'll get a little bit more backspin produced and stuff. So, but the speed and power that your opponent gets means that, you know, if you give him an easy ball, it's easy for him to whip one through you. So what I'd usually be saying is, on that blocking side of it, we are trying to be more aggressive with our block. Not going mad, but we are trying to place it in worse places. We are trying to up the spin on it and get more spin variation going, so that it's tougher for the opponent to attack. Because if we do just the same things we did at intermediate level, which is basically put the ball back, our opponent's going to win. Their technique is good enough that usually, you know, they're going to overpower you. So we've got to be taking some more chances at that level. And that feeds back into what I'm talking about, more aggressive play. You don't have to become an attacker. You don't have to change your style. You simply have to notch up and take a little bit more calculated risks, make things a little bit more harder for your opponent, so that you can nullify that power and get away with it. If you don't, you're going to level out somewhere about high intermediate, because that's the point at which your safe game matches up with the opponent's level of aggressive but mistakes, and there comes that point where you're both roughly equal. And then as your opponent keeps improving technique and making less mistakes, he will go past, because it's very then hard for you playing a safe game. You haven't got the room to improve. You get kind of capped. So bear it in mind. Okay. So just to run through, I had a little checklist basically here of aggressive play. I think I've talked most about that. Talked about the attitude, taking calculated risks. And by calculated, it's not so much taking a 50-50 chance. What you're hoping to do is take 80% chances, 90% chances, so that the odds are in your favour. But you can't afford to wait around for 100% safe attack, because chances are you're not going to get one very often, and if you're waiting for one, your opponent will already have made 70%, 80% attack, and you'll always be on the defensive. It's not a matter of waiting for the perfect ball to hit with your long pips or do something with your long pips. You've got to go with a good enough ball a little bit more often. And talked a little bit about just the long pip anti-play, what we're talking about in terms of pushing the envelope a bit more. And the last thing I was just mentioning here is attacking chance balls. And we're widening our range of what we consider a chance ball. As you go up from intermediate level, where basically you're saying, okay, if the ball is in this little area of the table with this amount of spin and I'm balanced, that's going to be my attack ball. And as you get better, you widen out the range of how far away from you can get it, how much spin is on it, can you still play your attack, how much backspin, how much topspin. We've got to widen that further at the advanced level, because if you're waiting for the perfect ball, you just don't get your chance. So at advanced level, what we're looking at is anything sort of in this range with roughly an amount of spin. We're going to go hard and try and overpower it. and get our spin on it and attack it. Simply because instead of getting easy balls, which you're hoping to force easy balls, but all those ones that aren't easy but are possible, we're trying to get attacking into those, or getting with our long pips or whatever, doing something more positive with them rather than safely putting it back. Otherwise we'll get stuck at a certain level. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about your opponent at this level. At this advanced level, what we're seeing in the opponents and what I'm seeing in my opponents is typically that you're going to see most opponents at this level will have a pretty good serve, one or two very good serves, a couple of very nasty ones, generally fairly good ones, not a lot of crappy ones that you get to attack very easily. So there's not a lot of freebie attacks going on. There will still be a couple. At this level that I'm playing, there's still the odd ones that go a little bit long off the table and can get attacked, but not so many that it's easy to do and do it often. So the serving's a lot tighter at this level. And along with that, the return of serve is a lot better as well. So when you're serving yourself, the easy balls coming back for you to attack are less. The outright mistakes where they put the serve in the net or off the table are less. So you're having to hit a lot more difficult balls than before. So that's notching up, okay? There's usually not, at this level, there's no big hole to take advantage of on their return of serve. You won't find, at intermediate level quite often, there's still some spots where if you can get it there, you can be pretty sure the opponent's going to flub it. He's got a little gap in his technique. At this level, not so much, because if they have that, it gets ruthlessly exploited and they train it out. They say, okay, I can't do this, I'll train it, and they bring it up to standard. It may not be a strength, but certainly they don't let themselves have weaknesses like that can be exploited. Because every other advanced player they play will know about it, will use it, and you can't beat an advanced player with that sort of gap. It just doesn't happen. So serve and serve returns much better. They all have good weapons. Now some may have one very good weapon, some may have two or three very good weapons, and others will just have a couple of fairly good weapons. And by weapons I mean basically ways to win points, ways to force mistakes. And they've all got them. So everybody's got some strengths there, because you can't get to an advanced level without some advantages, without something that you do well. And at this level that we're getting at, they're all starting to get fairly good at chaining that strength to their serve or to their serve return, so that they get to play their strengths often. And that's really what a lot of it's about at advanced level play. As an intermediate player, when an intermediate player comes up against an advanced level player, what you'll often see is basically the advanced level player is the one, he's getting his strengths in all the time, and the intermediate player can't stop him. And the advanced player just shuts down the intermediate player's strengths. So it looks almost worse than it is quite often, that although the gap in standard may only be kind of that much, quite often the play looks like that much, because the advanced player is just able to shut down all the good things the intermediate player does and dominate with his own good things. So they all have, I guess, good weapons, good point winning, good ways to win points, be it with their top spin attack, be it with their defensive spin variation, or intelligent use of the pip variation, moving stuff around, or using that to set up then the inverted attack afterwards. But they definitely do have weapons, okay? And of course you should have some as well. Technically, at this level, you'll see occasionally some strange techniques, some unorthodox type of techniques. That still occurs. Not often, maybe 10%, 15%, 20% of the players will have something that's a little bit different or strange. The rest of the games will all be fairly technically sound. And even the thing that's strange is quite often, it may be different, but it's not necessarily technically bad, it's just unusual. So there's not a lot of bad technique for you as the opponent to get your teeth into. So you won't usually say find an opponent who has a terrible forehand flick, that you can send the ball there again and again and just have him keep missing. Because they'll all have a decent forehand flick, and they'll certainly have other options. So the technical gaps are getting smoothed over. The weaknesses that are apparent and are still there in an intermediate level game, there's no glaring weaknesses. There are certain areas, certainly still areas that are not as strong. So they'll have very strong points, and they'll have some average areas. But these average areas aren't sort of like a glaring weakness that's, oh, if you get it there, it's a winner. It's more like, if you put it to that weakness, they can't necessarily attack you very hard or force the point. They may only be able to stay in the point, and you get another chance to hit your strength. So it's a relative weakness in that they can't usually win points with the weakness. They can only stay in the rally. And so there's not a lot of gaps that you can really exploit and just get a point from getting into that gap. It just doesn't happen, because you don't survive at this level with big gaps. You know. So that's kind of your opponent. Tactically, when we're talking about from a tactics point of view, well, tactics are always important, but certainly getting quite important now. And the level that I'm playing at can be quite interesting level, because what we're talking about here, and as you move up to it, you'll find a similar thing, is where we're at in this sort of 800 in the world downward level is it's the clash of some of the older players who have not necessarily outstanding technique, but usually have great ball control, good tactical play, and are very smart around the table, versus a lot of the young up-and-comers who have been trained in the, be aggressive, big top spins, power. And these two areas are clashing at about this level quite often. So there's a lot of old sneaky vets versus the young up-and-comers. And what you see is that the young up-and-comers usually have a couple of really big weapons. They have great serve and a booming forehand, sometimes a big backhand too, but they have power, and they're aggressive and they're going for it. They're taking chances and they're missing some and hitting some belting shots as well. So it's a bit more erratic. And there's a lot of these cagey vets who don't have big power, but they don't miss very much, tactically very smart, good spin variation, and placement variation, and they play an excellent tactical game. And what happens is these two styles are coming up against each other. And what it becomes then is, if the sneaky veteran can make the opponent misread enough, miss enough, the veteran will come out on top. But as the young guys keep improving and their technique gets better, they miss less, they read spin better, their forehand gets better, more power, serves get better, they start to come through and they move past. And eventually they'll get to this point where they will blast through the vet, simply because the weapons that they have become too overpowering. They serve too well and follow it up, they're too fast on their feet, they can get to anything, attack it, get the block, attack it again, with big power and big pace. And they eventually get to the stage where they overpower the vet. But while they're learning and getting that process, it's really quite interesting, because the vets can hold their own quite well. And there's a whole lot of interesting styled games between these young boomers and the ageing sneaky veterans. Occasionally you do get a good vet who's a little bit more now as they started to come through. You're starting to get some of these vets who actually trained in this style come into that and still trying to play with the power. And they're a step slower, but their technique is good. They can still hit pretty hard. And they're starting to come into that veteran game as well now. And that's going to be interesting to see how that shakes up. Because they're now going to have some older guys, good tactically, not quite as fast, but still with plenty of big power and good serves, mixing it up with some of the younger guys. And that can be quite interesting too. Training wise, just want to talk a little bit about training. at this level, I guess everybody trains differently. So I can't necessarily say that everybody at this level does this or does that. I can sort of say what I'm trying to do with my training and why, and what I've seen other people locally in my area who are about my level train as well. And what it comes down to is at this level you need to have, when you're training, you need to have a big focus on your strengths. Okay? And that by that you need to be doing plenty of serving, plenty of serve returning. You need to be doing whatever your weapon is, or if you've got more than one, hopefully. Whatever your weapons are, you've got to be getting them in and practicing a lot of that. In terms of your weaknesses, you can't ignore them. You can't afford to have a gaping hole. But there comes to a point where if you're working too much on making all of your weaknesses better and better and better, you're not going to be spending enough time on your strengths. Okay? You've only got a certain amount of time. Now let's say, for example, I had 1 hour a week to train. What would I be spending my time on? What would be the best way to spend my time in that 1 hour a week? Probably, if you really wanted to do the best that you could with it, at least of that 1 hour, at least 15 minutes service, probably 10 to 15 minutes of it serve return. Both of those two are going to be really important. So somewhere in the 20 to 30 minutes worth of serve and serve return out of that hour. Of the rest, I'd want to spend at least another half an hour, 20 minutes on my strengths. And at the minimum, at the most, 10 minutes of the hour on my worst weaknesses in terms of proportion. So roughly 40%, maybe 40 to 50 on serve return, 40 to 50 on my big shots, my strengths, my point winners, and my patterns that bring it out, 10% on where I'm weak, bringing that up, just up. Because, you know, you're weak at it usually for a reason, because, you know, you struggle with that. And no matter how hard you work, you're probably not going to make it ever a strength. You know, so do enough just so that it's not something that can be easily exploited. You know, and that's probably going to be all you can do. Spend the rest of the time working on your big weapons and getting them in, and doing it that way. That would be how I'd recommend it. And in terms of what I'm trying to do, that's roughly where I spend most of my time. I'm working on where I've got to be strong, where are my point winners. Now, as you would have noticed over the course of my blog and stuff that I've been writing, I've recently changed from the defensive style to the up the table style. That means I've got to shift things around in terms of what my focus on my strengths and my weaknesses are, because this is a different style of game. I will talk about that more separately though, in terms of when I go through a little bit about my planning for the year. We'll get into that. But basically, yeah, close up to the table, definitely serve return, patterns to get in the big attack. Okay? I no longer need to be working a lot on chopping. I don't need to be working on lobbing. I do need to be working more on flicking, because as a defender I didn't flick much at all. I used a lot of pushing. Now, close to the table, I need to flick. So I'm going to have to work on that. I've got to improve that. And different priorities. Training, yep. So I think, without sort of going on and on forever, I think that kind of, at an overview level, covers the differences between the intermediate level to the advanced level of play here. And from what I've talked about today, I guess you can kind of see is what I'm really focusing on is at this level, your opponent doesn't make enough free mistakes for you to win. Okay? Their technique is too solid, their reading of the spin is too good, and they've got enough weapons of their own that if you play safe, they'll blow you off the table. So at this level. So safe play no longer cuts it. So what we now have to do is we have to be intelligent in our use of taking risks of our own, whatever they may be for our style, whether it's a little bit more of the attacking, harder work with the pips, more intelligent twiddling, better serving, whatever. We've got to push our envelope a little bit more, okay? And still improve our techniques. You know, technically we can still make improvements, for sure. you know. But we're basically working at making it happen. We're looking at forcing errors from our opponent, putting him under more pressure. And sure, we're going to miss the odd ball because we're going to go for something that we're not quite balanced on. We're going to miss the side of the table. Occasionally we're going to clip the net. That's just the way it goes. That's the price you pay for wanting to operate on a more pressuring level, forcing more mistakes from your opponent. And the trick is to balance it so that you don't make so many mistakes that you take the pressure off. You know? And you don't play so safe that there is no pressure. Somewhere in between those two extremes, you're going to find a sweet spot where you're making a few mistakes, sure, but you're increasing the pressure enough that your opponent's making more mistakes. And so overall, in terms of your overall game, you go up. But that relies on your technique. Your technique has to be up to scratch. You can't have holes in your technique for your game at this level. So if you're up to the table, you can't have holes in your flick and your return of serve push. Okay? You've got to be able to, when you attack, make most of those three attacks. Okay, so technically we can't have gaps. Tactically, we've got to be looking very closely at what our strengths are, very closely at what our opponent's strengths are, making our plan, implementing it. All the stuff that I talked about in the intermediate level video all just applies even more so at this level. And training wise, we're working diligently on making our strengths, real weapons to be feared, and keeping our weaknesses giving them enough work that we can't be easily exploited. And we just don't lose points with them. It keeps us in the rally, gives us another chance to get in an attack. Because if you're you don't have time to spend bringing all your weaknesses up to high level. Get them just so that they're good enough to cover and can't be easily taken advantage of. Then get back to work on your strengths. Get back to work on your weapons. Because at this level, it's the weapons that are going to win the points. And as you go higher, it gets more and more so. Control, spin variation, safeness will be passed by someone who has a big booming forehand and a great serve to set it up and hits it 80% of the time, 90% of the time, and flicks well on the return of serve, gets the opponent to block it, whacks it again. That guy, as his percentages improves, as his forehand technique improves, as his footwork improves and he gets faster, that guy's going to keep going up and up and up. Because he's playing the style with this modern rubbers, you know, the power that's going to allow him to keep going. Now, does that mean that if you're not that type of player, you don't have a big booming forehand? And does that mean you can't make it to advanced level? No. It just means that whatever you've got, whatever weapons you have, you're going to have to make the real most of them. And it's a little bit of a limitation here. We're talking, in all honesty, that if you're 60 years old, if you can't move around the table very fast because your hips are shot, if you can't turn your shoulders because all your shoulders and waist are bent up, if you can't see the ball because your eyes are gone, well, you're going to find there is a limit. There is a limit somewhere to your potential. And we're going to try and bring you up as close as we can, but you may find that the limit may be at high intermediate. It may be at medium intermediate. It may be at low advanced or whatever. But you're looking to try and maximise your capabilities. So if you are physically unable to hit the ball very hard, you're going to struggle to make it to high advanced because you're not going to be able to have a weapon that allows you to force points. Doesn't mean that you can't do it. No, it's just very difficult. And it means that you then have to be even better with your pips or with your anti-spin, even better at twiddling, even better at spin variation with them, at placement. Good serves. I mean, you don't have to be very fit to do a good serve, so that becomes good. Same with return of serve. All of these things you can compensate for physical failings to a certain extent. But you come up against somebody who's done all that same stuff you have and also isn't physically limited and is 20 years old, yeah, well, he's going to beat you because he's got everything you've got, plus he's fast. So, you know, it's tough. But that's not to say that anybody who's 60 and not in great shape, you can still play a pretty damn good game of table tennis. And it's hard to say exactly where that potential is and what your limit is, and you won't know until you try. And it's I've seen some old guys who aren't very mobile, but they're cunning, play some very good table tennis indeed. So don't write yourself off short. Don't say, oh, I can only get to here because I know so-and-so and he only could get to there with what he had. You may find that you've got certain talents that you'll learn about tactically or otherwise. You may be able to go further. So keep working away at it and just wait and see. You may go further than you ever thought. But anyway, okay. Back to it. Advanced level play, make it happen. It's calculated risks, it's being aggressive, it's forcing mistakes. And at this level we play, whether you're a defensive player, you force mistakes from the variation of your backspin, picking balls off when the opponent gives you a weak return. Close to the table player, topspin players, it's all about doing stuff with a positive attitude to force mistakes rather than a play safe mentality, because that just doesn't work at this level. Okay?